The ghosts of Wales present many well-defined features. It is even possible to classify them after a fashion. Of course, as with all descriptions of phantoms, the vagueness inevitable in creatures of the imagination is here, but the ghosts of Welsh tradition are often so old and have been handed down so cleanly through successive generations that in our day they have almost acquired definite outlines, as in the case of images arising from the perceptions. The ghosts of departed mortals are usually the late personal acquaintances of the people who see them, but sometimes they are strangers whom nobody knows and concerning whom everybody is curious. Two such ghosts haunted the streets of Ebbw Vale in Glamorganshire in January 1877. One was in the shape of an old woman, the other in that of a girl child. Timid people kept indoors after nightfall, and there were many who believed thoroughly in the ghostly character of the mysterious visitors. Efforts were made to catch them, but they eluded capture. It was hinted by materialists that they were thieves, by unbelievers in spiritualism that they had perhaps escaped from a séance in some adjoining town. These ghosts, however, are not very interesting. A cultivated moderner can have no satisfaction in forming the acquaintance of a séance ghost. It is quite otherwise in the case of a respectable old family goblin, which has haunted a friend's house in the most orthodox manner for centuries. Such ghosts are numerous in Wales and quite faithfully believed in by selected individuals. Indeed, one of the highest claims to a dignified antiquity that can be put in by a Welsh family mansion is the possession of a good old-fashioned blood-curdling spectre, like that, for example, which has haunted Dyffryn House, a handsome stone manse near Cardiff for the past 200 years and more. This is the ghost of the doughty Admiral Sir Thomas Button, famed in his day as an Arctic navigator. Since his death, he has faithfully haunted, so the local farm folk say, the cellar and the garden of Dyffryn House where he lived when he did live, which was in the 17th century. He has never been known to appear in hall or chamber of the mansion, within the memory of man, but has been seen hovering over the beer butt or tun in the cellar, commemorated in his name, and walking in the flower garden of a fine, windy night. St. Donat's Castle is down on the southern coast of Glamorganshire, in a primitive region not yet profaned by railroads, nor likely to be perhaps for many years to come. It is owned and inhabited by a worthy gentleman whose ancestors for 7 centuries sleep in the graveyard under the old castle wall. Its favourite ghost, for to confine this or any other ancient Welsh castle to a single ghost would be almost disrespectful, is that of Lady Stradling, who was done away with by some of her family in those wicked old times when families did not always dwell in peace together. This ghost makes a practice of appearing when any mishap is about to befall a member of the House of Stradling, the direct line of which is, however, extinct, a fact not very well apprehended among the neighbouring peasantry. She wears high-heeled shoes and a long trailing gown of the finest silk. In this guise doth she wander up and down the long majestic halls and chambers, and while she wanders, the castle hounds refuse to rest, but with their howlings raise all the dogs of the village under the hill. Another purposeless spectre exists in the legend of Catrin Gwyn, told in Cardiganshire. The ruin of a shepherd's cottage, standing on a mountain waste near the river Rheidol, is the haunt of this spectre. A peasant who was asked to escort a stranger up the narrow defile of rocks by the ruin, in horror exclaimed, "In enwi Dione, peidiwch," in the name of heaven, sir, don't go, or you'll meet White Catty of the Grove Cave. And what's that? An evil spirit, sir. And the superstitious peasant would neither be laughed nor reasoned out of his fears. Catrin was the bride of a young shepherd living near Machynlleth in 1705. One day she went to market with a party of other peasants who separated from her on the return way at a point 2 miles from Gelly Gogo. She was never more seen alive. A violent storm arose in the night, and next day a scrap of her red cloak was found on the edge of a frightful bog, in which she is believed to have disappeared in the darkness and storm. The husband went mad. Their cottage fell to decay, and to this day the shepherds declare that Catty's ghost haunts the spot. It is most often seen, and in its most terrific shape, during howling storms when it rides on the gale, shrieking as it goes. Few Cambrian spirits are devoid of a didactic purpose. Some teach reverence for the dead, a lesson in great request among the rising generation in Wales and elsewhere. The church at Tregaron, Cardiganshire, was being rebuilt in 1877, and certain skulls were turned up by the diggers in making new foundations. The boys of Tregaron amused themselves playing ball with the skulls, picking out their teeth, banging them against the wall to see if they would break and the like. They probably never heard the story told by Mrs. Morgan of Newport to the Prophet Jones, of some people who were drinking at an inn there, two of them officers of excise, when one of the men, to show his courage, declared he was afraid of no ghosts and dared go to the charnel house and fetch a skull from that ghastly place. This bold and dangerous thing he did, and the men debated over their beer whether it was a male or a female skull. After a jolly hour over the skull, the bold one carried it back and left it where he got it, but as he was leaving the church, suddenly a tremendous blast like a whirlwind seized him, and so mauled and hauled him that his teeth chattered in his head and his knees knocked together, and he ever after swore that nothing should tempt him to such a deed again. He was still more convinced that the ghost of the original owner of the skull had been after him when he got home, and his wife told him that his cane, which hung in the room, had been beating against the wall in a dreadful manner. As a rule, the motive for the reappearance on earth of a spirit lately tenanting a mortal body is found in some neglected duty. Many are the tales displaying the motive on the ghost's part of a duty to perform, sometimes clearly defining it, sometimes vaguely suggesting it, as in the story of Noe. The evening was far gone when a traveller of the name of Noe arrived at an inn in Pembrokeshire and called for refreshment. After remaining some time, he remarked that he must proceed on his journey. "Surely," said the astonished landlord, "you will not travel at night, for it is said that a ghost haunts that road, crying out, 'The days are long and the nights are cold to wait for Noe.' 'Oh, I am the man sought for,' said he, and immediately departed. But strange to say, neither Noe nor the ghost was ever heard of afterwards. The ghost of a weaver, which appeared to Walter John Harry, had a very clear idea of the duty he must perform. Walter John Harry was a Quaker, a harmless, honest man, and by trade a farrier who lived in the romantic valley of Ebwy Fawr. The house he lived in was haunted by the ghost of Morgan Lewis, a weaver who had died in that house. One night, while lying awake in his bed, with his wife sleeping by his side, Harry saw a light slowly ascending the stairs, and being somewhat afraid, though he was naturally a fearless man, strove to awake his wife by pinching her, but could not awake her. So there he lay in great fear, and with starting eyes beheld the ghost of the weaver come up the stairs, bearing a candle in its hand and wearing a white woolen cap on its head, with other garments usual to the weaver when alive. The ghost came near the farrier's bed, who then mustered up courage to speak to it. "Morgan Lewis," said Harry, "why dost thou walk this earth?" The ghost replied with great solemnity that its reason for so doing was that there were some bottoms of wool hidden in the wall of this house, and until these said bottoms were removed from the wall it could not sleep. The ghost did not say this wool had been stolen, but such was the inference. However, the harmless farrier spoke severely to the ghost, saying, "I charge thee, Morgan Lewis, in the name of God, that thou trouble my house no more," whereupon the ghost vanished, and the house ceased thereafter to be haunted. The laws governing the Welsh spirit world are clear and explicit. A ghost on duty bent has no power of speech until first spoken to. Its persistency in haunting is due to its eager desire to speak and tell its urgent errand, but the person haunted must take his courage in both hands and put the question to the issue. Having done so, he is booked for the end of the business, be it what it may. The mode of speech adopted must not vary in addressing a spirit. In the name of the Father, Son, or Holy Ghost it must be addressed, and not otherwise. Its business must be demanded. 3 times the question must be repeated, unless the ghost answer earlier. When it answers, it speaks in a low and hollow voice, stating its desire, and it must not be interrupted while speaking, for to interrupt, it is dangerous in the extreme. At the close of its remarks, questions are in order. They must be promptly delivered, however, or the ghost will vanish. They must bear on the business in hand. It is offended if asked as to its state, or other idle questions born of curiosity. Neglect to obey the ghost's injunctions will lead to much annoyance and eventually to dire results. At first, the spirit will appear with a discontented visage, next with an angry one, and finally, with a countenance distorted with the most ferocious rage. Obedience is the only method of escape from its revenge. Such is a résumé of the laws. The illustrations thereof are generally consistent in their details. The story of Cadogan's ghost is one of many in kind. Thomas Cadogan was the owner of a large estate in the parish of Llanfihangel Llantarnam, and being a covetous man, did wickedly remove his landmarks in such a way as to absorb to himself part of the land of a widow, his neighbor. After his death, this injustice troubled him, and as a certain woman was going home one night, at a stile she passed over, she met Cadogan's ghost. By a strange forgetfulness, this woman for the moment lost sight of the fact that Cadogan was now a ghost. She had momentarily forgotten that Cadogan was dead. "Mr. Cadogan," said she, with ungrammatical curiosity, "what does you here this time o' night?" To which the ghost answered, "I was obliged to come." It then explained the matter of the landmarks, and begged the woman to request a certain person, whom it mentioned, to remove them back to their proper places, and then the ghost vanished. At this unexpected termination of the interview, the woman suddenly recollected Cadogan's death and fell into a state of extreme terror. She, however, did as the ghost had bidden her, and Cadogan walked no more.